Pessa stood in the doorway of her childhood home, her hands trembling as she stared at the man she once called her hero. Her father's words cut deeper than any blade. "Your room is for your sister's family now," he said casually, as if he wasn't tearing apart years of loyalty in one breath. Behind him, her younger sister, Zira, smirked, her husband's bags already sitting on the floor of Pessa's room. For a moment, Pessa wanted to scream, to ask why. But instead she smiled, a calm, terrifying smile, and reached into her bag. When she pulled out the eviction letter, her father's expression shifted from pride to panic. No one in the house knew that everything they stood in now belonged to her. After 6 long years of hard work abroad, Pessa finally returned home. She had dreamed of this day, of sleeping in her own bed again, in the room she had once painted with her favorite blue color. She thought her father would welcome her with open arms, proud of the daughter who had sent money every month to keep the family going. But as soon as she walked through the door, the air felt cold. Her father didn't even smile. Zira, her younger sister, stood beside him, her husband's arm wrapped around her shoulders, a smirk on her face. Before Pessa could even set her bag down, her father said calmly, "Pessa, your room will now belong to Zira and her husband. They need it more than you." His words froze her in place. For a moment, she thought she had heard wrong. The room she worked years to rebuild, the one she had cried for when she was lonely overseas, was now being handed to someone else? Pessa looked at her father, hoping he was joking, but his face stayed firm. "You've been away for years," he continued. "Zira is married now. She deserves comfort." Zira smiled proudly, already looking toward Pessa's room like she owned it. Pessa's lips parted, but no words came out. She wanted to ask why. Why the daughter who sacrificed everything was being treated like a stranger. But instead, she stood silently, her eyes burning with disbelief. Zira gave a fake laugh and said, "Sister, don't worry, you can stay in the storage room for now. It's not that bad." Their father nodded in agreement, as if it was the most reasonable thing in the world. The man she once trusted to protect her had just given away her space without a second thought. Pessa slowly carried her small bag to the corner, trying not to let them see the tears gathering in her eyes. The house that once felt like home now felt like a place she didn't belong. Her heart ached, but she swallowed the pain quietly. She reminded herself that she came back to rest, not to fight. Still deep inside, something began to change. She realized that love and loyalty meant nothing to those who only cared about comfort and control. And as she looked at her father and sister, laughing together, she promised herself that one day, they would remember this moment, and wish they hadn't treated her like she didn't matter. The next morning, Pessa tried to act normal. She swept the compound, made breakfast, and greeted everyone like old times. She hoped things would calm down, but Zira made sure that peace didn't last long. As Pessa set plates on the table, Zira laughed and said loudly, "Oh sister, you don't need to do all that. You're just a visitor now. Guests don't do chores." Her tone was playful, but the words cut deep. Their father chuckled softly, and their mother only smiled, pretending not to notice how Pessa's hands froze in midair. Zira and her husband sat comfortably in the living room, acting like they owned the house. Zira spoke about her new life in the city, about her husband's car, their expensive clothes, and how tired she was of hotels. "This house will finally feel alive with us here," she said, glancing at Pessa with a fake smile. "No offense, sister, but you've been gone too long. It's time the real family settled in." Pessa said nothing. She quietly continued serving food, her heart tightening with every word. Her mother complimented Zira's dress, saying how proud she was of her daughter's successful marriage. Her father nodded, saying, "Zira brings light to this home. She knows how to take care of her husband." Then he looked at Pessa briefly and said, "You should learn from her." Pessa lowered her eyes, biting her tongue. She wanted to remind them how every brick in this house had been bought with her sweat, how she had sent money when no one else could. But she stayed silent. Zira noticed her quietness and took it as weakness. She leaned closer and whispered, "You left too long, sister. You gave up your place here. Don't expect things to be the same." Later that day, Pessa passed by her old room and saw Zira inside, decorating it with new curtains and laughing with her husband. Her childhood photos had already been removed from the wall. Zira noticed her at the door and said, "Oh Pessa, please knock next time. This isn't your room anymore." Their parents stood by, smiling, pretending nothing was wrong. Pessa nodded and walked away slowly, holding back her tears. She had once believed family was forever, but now she saw how easily love could turn into pride and distance. Her silence wasn't weakness. It was the only thing keeping her from breaking down completely. And deep inside, she began to understand. Sometimes the people you build everything for are the first to push you out once they start to shine. Years before that painful homecoming, Pessa had lived in a small, crowded apartment overseas. Every morning before sunrise, she would rush to the bus stop, heading to one of her 2 jobs. During the day, she cleaned offices. At night, she worked at a restaurant washing dishes. Her hands were always rough, her back always aching, but she never complained. Each month, she sent money back home so her parents could rebuild the family house and pay for her mother's medical treatment. She never missed a single payment. Even when she barely had enough to eat, she used to smile each time she received pictures of the construction. The new walls, the roof, the shining tiles. Her father had told her proudly, "This will always be your home, my daughter. Your mother prays for you every day." Those words kept her going when life abroad felt unbearable. There were nights when she sat alone in her tiny room, missing her family so much that she cried herself to sleep. But she always told herself that it would be worth it, that one day she'd return home and finally rest in peace under the roof she helped build. When her mother fell ill again, Pessa sent even more money. She stopped buying new clothes, skipped meals, and even sold her phone once just to cover the hospital bills. Her sister Zira, still in school at that time, never offered to help. In fact, she often called only to ask for new shoes or pocket money. Yet Pessa gave without hesitation. She believed family came first. She never knew that her sacrifices were slowly turning her family's gratitude into greed. Her father began telling neighbors that his hard work abroad was paying off, taking credit for all that Pessa had done. Zira bragged to her friends about their beautiful home, never mentioning the sister who had built it from miles away. But Pessa didn't know any of that. In her mind, she was doing something noble, building security for everyone she loved. Every time she felt exhausted, she imagined walking into her old room again, placing her head on her pillow, and hearing her mother say, "You did well, my daughter." That dream gave her strength to survive the hardest days. Now, standing in that same house years later, watching her sister mock her, Pessa finally saw the truth. The walls she paid for with her sweat and tears now echoed with betrayal. The home she thought she was building for love had become a stage for humiliation. Yet deep inside, she knew something they didn't, that one day, everything they took from her would lead to their biggest regret. Pessa stood quietly as her father pointed toward the small, dusty storage room at the back of the house. "You can stay there for now," he said firmly, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. The words felt like stones hitting her chest, but she didn't argue. She nodded slowly, picked up her small suitcase, and walked toward the dark room that once stored broken chairs and old tools. The air was thick with dust, the floor uneven, and the single window barely let in light. She placed her bag in the corner and sat down on an old stool, staring at the empty walls. The same house she helped rebuild now felt like a stranger's place. From across the hallway, she could hear laughter and the sound of Zira's voice echoing through the corridor. Curious, she stepped out quietly and peeked into her old room. Zira and her husband were standing in front of the mirror, taking selfies, smiling proudly as if they had just bought a mansion. The curtains Pessa had once chosen with her mother now hung behind them. Her favorite bedsheet had been replaced with Zira's expensive new set. Every piece of that room carried a memory for Pessa, but now it was being turned into a trophy for someone else's pride. Zira noticed her standing at the door and said sharply, "Oh, you're still here? Please don't stand there looking like a ghost. This is our space now." Her husband chuckled, wrapping an arm around Zira. "She'll get used to it," he said, smirking. Their words stabbed Pessa deeply, but she forced a small smile and walked away without replying. She refused to let them see her pain. Later that evening, her father called her to the living room. His voice carried no warmth. "Pessa," he began, "I don't want arguments in this house. Respect family decisions and stop questioning authority. Your sister is married, and she deserves comfort. You're single. You've lived abroad for years. You should understand how things work." Pessa looked at him, her heart breaking. This was the same man she had trusted more than anyone, The same father who used to say she was his pride. Now his eyes showed nothing but coldness. She nodded silently and said, "Yes, Papa," even though every word felt heavy on her tongue. That night, lying on a thin mat in the storage room, Pessa stared at the ceiling, listening to the sound of Zira's laughter coming from her old room. Each giggle felt like a reminder of how far her family had drifted from her. She could smell the faint scent of paint from the walls she had once dreamed about. Tears rolled down her cheeks quietly. She didn't know when her family had stopped seeing her as their daughter and started treating her as a burden. But in that silence, a small fire began to grow inside her, a quiet strength that whispered, "This isn't the end." That night, the house was quiet. Everyone was asleep, and only the sound of the wind passed through the windows. Pessa couldn't sleep. Her heart was heavy, her mind full of questions. She got up from the thin mat in the storage room and sat on the floor, thinking about everything she had done for her family. Every memory of her sacrifices came rushing back, the long hours she worked, the money she sent, and the trust she had placed in her father. She wondered how love could turn into rejection so quickly. She looked around the small storage room and noticed a pile of old boxes in the corner. Out of curiosity, she began to clear them one by one. Most were filled with useless things, rusted tools, old shoes, broken toys from childhood. But as she moved a wooden box, a small brown envelope slipped out. It was sealed but old, the corners torn and dusty. Something about it caught her attention. Her father's handwriting was on the front, and it read, "House mortgage, final payment receipts." Pessa frowned and slowly opened it. Inside were several official papers, all neatly arranged. As she read through them, her hands began to shake. Each document had her name printed on it. The final page stopped her heart for a moment. It was the property title deed. And at the very top, clearly written, was owner, Pessa Lumo. She blinked several times, unable to believe what she was seeing. The house, the very house her father claimed as his, was legally hers. Her mind flashed back to those years abroad when her father had told her about the mortgage payments. "Don't worry," he had said over the phone. "I'll handle everything. Just send the money every month. It's our family's home." She remembered trusting him completely, never doubting his words. She had no idea that all the money she sent had gone directly into paying off the property under her own name. He must have done it to make her feel useful, never expecting she'd one day find out the truth. Pessa sat still for a long time, her eyes fixed on the papers. It was like life had handed her the truth at the exact moment she needed it most. Every moment of humiliation, every tear she had cried in silence, now had a reason. She finally understood why the house had always felt like hers, because it truly was. She carefully folded the papers back into the envelope, her mind racing. Her pain began to turn into quiet power. For the first time since returning home, she felt calm. The truth was now in her hands. They had treated her like a guest, but fate had already written a different story. She smiled softly to herself, knowing that the time to reveal this truth would come soon. And when it did, no one would ever forget it. The next morning, Pessa woke up before anyone else. The house was still and quiet, but her heart was full of thoughts. She sat on the edge of the old stool in her small room, holding the brown envelope tightly against her chest. The documents she found last night had changed everything. The house that everyone claimed belonged to her father was legally hers. But instead of rushing to confront them, she decided to stay calm. For the first time, she realized silence could be more powerful than shouting. She carefully tucked the papers into her bag and got ready to leave. As she stepped outside, her father saw her and asked coldly, "Where are you going so early?" Pessa smiled lightly and replied, "Just running some errands." He nodded and went back inside, not knowing his world was about to shift completely. When she reached the land office, her hands trembled slightly as she handed over the documents to the clerk. "Please, I need to confirm the ownership of this house," she said softly. The man took the papers, adjusted his glasses, and started checking the system. Every second felt like an hour. Finally, he looked up and said, "Yes, madam. According to the records, this property belongs to Pessa Lumo. You are the sole legal owner." Those words made her eyes fill with tears. All the long nights of working 2 jobs, all the sacrifices, all the humiliation. It had not been for nothing. Her hard work had built something real, something that no one could take away from her. She stepped out of the office and sat on a bench outside, the morning sun touching her face. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but this time, they were not from pain. They were from relief. She whispered to herself, I didn't lose everything. I built everything. For a while, she just sat there, thinking about her mother. She remembered the promise she made years ago, to always take care of the family. And she had done that. Even though they forgot her kindness, even though they turned against her, she had fulfilled her promise in full. The house stood tall because of her. When she finally stood up to leave, there was a new calmness in her walk. She no longer felt weak or unwanted. She knew what she had to do, but she would do it with grace. There was no need to argue or beg for respect. The truth itself was stronger than any words she could say. As she walked back home, Pessa looked at the house in the distance. It no longer looked like a place of rejection. It was hers. Every wall, every brick, every corner. For the first time in years, she felt peace rising inside her heart. She smiled quietly, knowing that destiny had just returned what was rightfully hers, and soon, everyone would see it too. The next day, the house was filled with noise and movement. Relatives from different towns arrived one by one, laughing and greeting each other loudly. Her father had organized a big family gathering to celebrate what he proudly called Zira's homecoming. The tables were filled with food, and music played softly in the background. Everyone looked happy, everyone except Pessa. She sat quietly in the corner, watching as her father welcomed the guests, talking about how his younger daughter and her husband had brought new life to the family home. No one mentioned Pessa, not even once. Zira walked around like a queen, showing the guests her new room, and telling them how she planned to redecorate it. Her husband laughed and said, We'll make this place shine again. Each word pierced Pessa's heart like a knife, but she stayed calm. Her face showed no emotion, even though inside she was breaking. When relatives asked her how life abroad had been, she only smiled and said, It was fine. None of them knew what she had been through, or how much she had given up for the same people now celebrating her replacement. As lunch was served, her father stood in the center of the living room, his voice loud and commanding. I thank everyone for coming to celebrate my daughter Zira and her husband. They'll be staying here from now on, he announced proudly. Everyone clapped and cheered. Then, turning toward Pessa, he added, And Pessa, you must prepare to move out by the weekend. You've done enough traveling, but now it's time to give space to the family that truly needs it. The room went silent for a moment before whispers spread quickly among the guests. Some looked at Pessa with pity, others with surprise. A few even nodded, agreeing with her father's words, not knowing the truth. Pessa felt the weight of every stare, but she didn't react. She simply looked down at her hands, breathing slowly, fighting the tears that wanted to escape. Her father didn't stop there. You're a grown woman now, he said coldly. It's time you learn to build your own place. This home is no longer for you. Zira smiled proudly, squeezing her husband's hand. Thank you, Papa. We'll take good care of it, she said sweetly. Their mother nodded in approval, clearly happy with the decision. Pessa lifted her eyes slowly, her calmness returning. She looked around the room filled with people who had no idea what she knew, the truth that would soon silence every voice there. She gave a small smile and said softly, I understand. Then she stood up, excused herself, and walked away to her small room. Inside she sat quietly, her heart steady. The time had finally come. They wanted her gone, but they had no idea that the house they were fighting over already had her name written all over it. For a long moment after her father's words, Pessa sat in silence, feeling all eyes on her. The air in the room grew thick with tension. Some relatives whispered among themselves, wondering how she would react to being told to leave her own home. Zira sat proudly beside her husband, smiling like someone who had just won a long-awaited battle. Pessa could see the satisfaction on her sister's face, and even her father looked certain that his decision was final. But Pessa didn't look broken. She looked calm. Too calm for someone who had just been humiliated in front of everyone. After a short pause, Pessa slowly stood up. Every movement was quiet, but full of purpose. The noise in the room began to fade as people turned their attention to her. Her calmness made everyone curious. She walked across the room toward her small handbag resting on a chair near the wall. Her father frowned slightly. Where are you going? He asked, his voice showing a hint of unease. Pessa didn't answer. She opened her bag gently, reached inside and pulled out a brown envelope, the same one she had found days ago. For a second, no one spoke. Zira crossed her arms and laughed lightly. "What's this now?" she said mockingly. "Are you writing us a goodbye letter?" Her husband chuckled beside her, and even a few relatives smiled, thinking it was all over. Pessa turned around, holding the envelope firmly. Her expression remained peaceful, but her eyes were sharp with quiet strength. She looked straight at her father and said softly, "You said this house is yours, but the papers say otherwise." The words hung in the air like a sudden strike. The laughter stopped immediately. Her father blinked, unsure if he had heard her correctly. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice suddenly unsteady. Pessa walked forward slowly and placed the brown envelope on the table in front of him. "Everything inside will explain," she said calmly. The relatives leaned closer, their curiosity growing. Zira's confident smile began to fade as she watched her father open the envelope. Inside were the documents, the title deed and payment receipts, each one carrying Pessa's name. Her father's hands trembled slightly as he read the top of the paper. "Owner, Pessa Lumo." The silence in the room grew heavy. No one dared to speak. Pessa stood still, her voice steady and clear. "For years I sent money believing I was helping this family. I didn't know that every payment I made me the rightful owner of this house. I didn't take anything from anyone. I only paid what was owed." Her eyes moved from her father to Zira. "You wanted me out," she said gently. "But you were already standing in my home." The room remained frozen. Pessa didn't shout, didn't cry, she simply spoke the truth. And that truth alone was powerful enough to shake every person sitting there. Pessa looks directly at her father and then at the relatives around her. Her calm face hides the storm she once carried in her heart. Without raising her voice, she steps closer and places a white envelope on the table in front of her father. Everyone leans forward, curious. Her father frowns, thinking it's another letter about work or some small document. But as he opens it and begins to read, his expression changes. His hands start to tremble slightly. Inside is not just any paper. It's an official eviction notice, signed, sealed, and stamped by the court. The room falls silent. Even the laughter from a moment ago fades away. Pessa looks at her father and says softly, "This house you wanted me to leave, it legally belongs to me. Every brick, every wall, was paid for with my sweat." No one moves. No one dares to speak. Zira's smile freezes, and her husband, seated beside her, shifts uncomfortably. He leans forward, trying to argue. "You can't do this. This is your family's home." But Pessa turns to him and says, "My family's home? I was the one who kept this home alive. When the bills came, I paid them. When the mortgage was due, I cleared it. And when you all forgot me, I was still the one sending money here." Her father's eyes widen in disbelief, but before he can speak, a man in a suit steps inside. It's the lawyer, who has been waiting outside quietly. He greets everyone, and then confirms what Pessa just said. The ownership documents are clear. The property is under Miss Pessa's name. The court has issued a notice for the current occupants to vacate within 7 days. Gasps ripple through the room. Some relatives whisper in shock. Others stare at Pessa as if seeing her for the first time. Zira jumps to her feet, pointing at Pessa, her voice shaking. "You planned this. You tricked everyone." But Pessa only shakes her head. "No," she says calmly. "I just worked hard while you all mocked me. I gave everything to this family, and you tried to take it all away. I'm only taking back what's rightfully mine." Her father lowers his gaze, guilt flooding his face. The reality hits him harder than words ever could. Zira's husband mutters something about finding a lawyer, but everyone knows it's useless. The papers are real, the stamp official, and the truth undeniable. As Pessa turns to leave, she looks back one last time and says quietly, "You wanted my room. Now you'll need a new home." The words hang heavy in the air. No one dares to stop her. The same house where she was once treated as unwanted now stands as her greatest victory. A home that finally belongs to the one who earned it. Her father's voice breaks as he tries to speak, his pride now replaced by regret. He reaches out, begging her to reconsider, his eyes filled with the same fear she once carried when she was told to leave. "Pessa, please, we didn't mean it that way," he says softly, his voice trembling. But she stands still, calm and steady. her eyes no longer searching for love or approval. Zira sits on the couch, her face pale, her arrogance gone. The same sister who once smirked now avoids Pessa's gaze, unable to say a word. For a long moment no one moves. The air feels heavy with the weight of truth. Pessa looks around the living room that once made her feel small. The same walls that heard her cry in silence. The same floor where she packed her things to leave. But this time she stands tall. This time, she owns every corner of it. Her voice is gentle but strong when she finally speaks. "You taught me that blood means obedience," she says, her words cutting through the silence. "But I learned that respect must be earned. I built this house brick by brick, with every sacrifice. Every night I worked while you slept, and now, it finally belongs to someone who values it." Her father lowers his head, unable to meet her eyes. Zira whispers something, maybe an apology, but Pessa doesn't wait to hear it. She knows that forgiveness doesn't always mean returning to pain. She picks up her bag, the same one she brought when she came home hoping for peace, and walks toward the door. Every step feels lighter, as if she's shedding years of hurt with each movement. Relatives whisper among themselves, some in awe, some in guilt. A few look at her with respect, realizing she was never weak, only kind, and they mistook that kindness for silence. Her father calls her name one last time, but she doesn't turn back. She pauses at the doorway, takes a slow breath, and says quietly, "Take care of yourselves." Then she walks out into the sunlight, her peace unshaken. Behind her, the house that once echoed with laughter now sits in stunned silence. No one dares to speak. Everyone knows things will never be the same again. Pessa doesn't need to win their approval anymore. She has already won something far greater: her freedom, her dignity, and her peace. As she walks down the path, the faint sound of the wind follows her, but it's not sorrow anymore, it's peace. She doesn't look back, because she knows the silence she left behind will speak louder than any argument ever could. That day, her family finally learned what it meant to lose someone who had once given them everything.